Hey guys,
Hey everybody.
welcome to another Travel Therapy Mentor weekly video. Tonight we're going to be talking about semi-retirement, which is something that I've thought a lot about over the last couple years. It's been 2 years now since we started our own version of semi-retirement, and to be honest, we wish we had started it earlier in our travel therapy career. So tonight we want to talk about semi-retirement, our journey towards it, and why we think others should try to do something similar. Many other travel therapists, it would probably be a very good thing for them to do as well. Whitney's going to introduce us. I'm going to get this video shared in a couple different groups.
All right. Hey everybody. Thank y'all for joining us tonight. My name is Whitney Aiken,
And I'm Jared Kazaza.
and we are both traveling doctors of physical therapy. You guys, many of you all may have tuned in for our videos or our podcasts in the past. We try to do a different video on a different topic every week about something travel therapy related, or sometimes our videos kind of go over into the realm of financial planning and financial independence, because that's a big thing that we're passionate about in our career path as travel therapists. So as Jared mentioned, after he gets done sharing our video live in a couple of other groups so more people can join on with us, we will talk a little bit about our path and kind of the way that we've structured our lifestyle as travel therapists. And a lot of people ask us, how have you guys been able to do that? How are you able to take off so much time from work? How have you traveled so many amazing places? And a lot of people are interested in doing something similar with their lifestyle, and they want to know kind of how we got to where we are. So tonight we'll talk a little bit about that, about our path, give you guys some suggestions, and sort of explain how this whole thing works, because a lot of people are like, that just seems really unrealistic to me. I think there's a lot of people that think, well, it's only because you guys are a travel couple that you can make it happen, or it's only because you're both healthcare professionals. What if my situation doesn't look like that? So we'll give you a little information on that tonight. And then just some other quick announcements about us. We are still at home in Virginia right now. We haven't been working. I haven't been working since February. We are getting ready to go on a road trip here soon. So we're still kind of in the planning stages of that. So stay tuned for more information on that. Other than that, we've just been kind of working on our online business and hanging out at home. So not working as travel PTs at the moment. And then also, if you guys are watching this live, I know a lot of you guys are tuning in live right now. I see a few of you are on. Thank you for joining us live. Hey, Jeff. Hey, everybody. If you are watching live, we'd love if you comment, ask us questions. At the end of the video, we will answer some questions. Also, if you enjoyed the video, if you learned anything, please feel free to hit the thumbs up button, give us a like. And then later, if you're watching this on our YouTube or listening to the replay on the podcast, thank you again for joining us, whether you're joining live or on the replay.
Yep. So what is semi-retirement? In our opinion, or I guess there's a lot of different definitions, but our definition is working only half the year. So working 6 months on, taking 6 months off. And I think travel therapists are in a very unique position to do this type of thing, because by nature, our work is contracts, usually 3 months at a time. So it's the perfect situation to work 2 contracts per year, take 2 contracts off, and work on other interests, travel. This is a really good way to avoid burnout and things like that, which you hear a lot talked about in different therapy groups right now.
Yes, I think it's important to ask, why are we talking about this? Maybe you're listening and you're like, I don't know, I just like my career. I like being a PT, I like being an OT. Why would I want to be retired? I just started my career. We have a lot of students, a lot of new grads that listen to our videos, and they don't really think about retirement at this stage. But there are some people. Jared is really big into, we talked about in a recent video, the financial independence movie, and there's also movement. Not movie. There's, I think, a documentary on it, but I meant to say movement. So the financial independence movement, and then there's the FIRE movement, FIRE, the financial independence retire early movement, which is kind of what Jared kind of set out headlong into, to retire early. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily relate with that. They don't think, well, I don't really want to work so hard for several years and then retire super duper early and then retire to nothing and have nothing to do. So this sort of semi-retirement that we're going to talk about today, we think is the perfect balance, actually. And we're going to explain why we think it's the perfect balance. And we're also going to paint a picture for you guys of some different ways that you might want to just think about designing your life around work.
Yeah, and like Whitney said, a lot of people don't resonate with just completely retiring. Maybe you do enjoy your career. We both enjoy being therapists. We just do not really want to do it 40 hours a week for 52 weeks a year. So a semi-retirement of sorts gives you time for other interests, things like learning new things. I have a ton of different interests that I like to learn about. Working on investing, like real estate properties, that's something we want to work on, is getting some real estate and investing there. We enjoy things like gardening, hiking, taking time off to travel, spending time with family. All these things are much easier in a semi-retirement kind of situation where you have a long period of time off.
Yeah, I think there's a ton of people that set out and find themselves in a pretty traditional American dream lifestyle path. They have a full-time 40-hour-a-week job. Maybe they have a partner that they love. They're starting a family. They have a house that they like and a car that they like. And then at some point they look and they think, wow, like I'm just so busy all the time. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to take off a little more time from work? I know a lot of people look at their lives and they say, wow, like Monday through Sunday is just so jam-packed. I don't even have enough time for my other interests, like for reading or for learning other things, for spending more time with my kids, with my family, with aging parents, and just making more time for the things that you love. And I mean, travel is a big one too. Like a lot of people are like, I only get 2 weeks a year of travel and I don't have time to just be gallivanting off to Europe or Asia or somewhere, because 2 weeks is not very much. So what we're going to talk about is just some ways that you could kind of structure your life so you have more time off built in while still earning a pretty high income and being able to live a very rewarding life.
So let's talk about our story, and we can kind of talk about how we got to where we are and why we wish we had gone with some sort of semi-retirement earlier. So we worked pretty much, graduated 2015, and have traveled pretty much consistently since 2015, working for the first 3 years, back-to-back contracts, working as many hours as possible. We were both working overtime some weeks, trying to work back-to-back really, and work on other interests to make money outside of work. So we, especially me, I was really in this like full sprint towards saving as much as possible to get to a position of financial independence. Since then, 2018 is when we started taking a lot more time off to travel internationally, and we realized that, hey, we really don't have to work so much. We could really take a lot of time off and we would still be in a good position financially. And a lot of that is because of the nest egg we built up the first few years. What I kind of learned through that, Whitney's experience has been a little bit different, is that so I've only worked 10 weeks in the last 2 years, and taking so much time off after working so diligently towards a goal for really all of school and then 3 years of being a therapist, taking so much time off was kind of too big of a change for me. It was like going from 100 to 0. And I wish that we had more of a transition period in there, going from like working 3 months on, 3 months off earlier, so that it wasn't such a big transition from working nonstop to almost working none.
Yeah, and we're going to get into in a little bit, after we kind of lay some of the groundwork, what we think that you guys could look at as a potential future plan for yourself. Like, wow, I could really see designing my life in such a way, like Jared said, maybe 3 months on, 3 months off. And looking back, there were a lot of other travel therapists that we knew that were actually doing something like this. They didn't necessarily look at it like they had saved up enough to call it any kind of retirement, but there were tons of therapists out there who were doing 3 to 6 months of work and then taking a week off, 2 weeks off, 3 weeks off, a month off. There were definitely other therapists who were taking like a whole month off to go home, to go travel somewhere. So there are other therapists out there doing this. It's not just us. I think we just did it to like a huge extreme where we worked really, really hard, continuous back-to-back contracts, like Jared said, for 3 years. And then the past 2.5 years, we've only worked like one contract or less per year. And it's been more like 6 to 9 months off of work, which has allowed us to take some of these really big, long international trips, which have been amazing, but kind of just based on our experience, we think there could maybe be a better way to do it and break it up a little bit. So we'll get into that. But like Jared said, so in 2018, we worked 6 months, took 6 months off. In 2019, we each worked a 3-month contract, then took about 6-7 months off. And then I started another 3-month contract that overlapped from the end of 19 to the beginning of 20. But Jared hasn't worked since that contract in 19. So for 2020, he hasn't worked, period. And I've only worked that little bit of a contract that overlapped into the beginning of 20. And kind of a little bit of what we've been doing in our time off. In 2018, we took a 5-month trip to different countries. through Europe and Asia. I think we went to, 15 countries?
Yeah.
And then in 19, we took a 4-month trip all around Europe to another 15 or so countries. And then this year we were supposed to be traveling in Latin America for the entire summer for about 5 months. And then we had to cancel that. So that's led to 5 months off unexpectedly in our hometown.
Yeah. One thing that we've learned, especially working in clinics, talking to older people, is that most people spend most of their working lives saving, paying bills to get to a point of retirement in order to be able to travel. And what a lot of those people, I'm sure you guys have had similar experiences, what a lot of those people realize is that when they get to retirement age, they're not really in that great a shape to travel, and they wish they had done it younger. And I think as travel therapists, we have the unique ability to be able to take these long trips out of the country, travel, even domestically. A lot of people wish they had done more domestic travel, traveling around the country, traveling out of the country, and can take advantage of that, whereas other people cannot do that.
It's wild because in 2018, when we said, we're going to take off the rest of the year 6 months and go on this trip, everybody that we talked to was like, oh my gosh, you're going on the trip of your lifetime. You're going to remember this for the rest of your life. And what people didn't know, especially people that weren't in our travel therapy community, were like, this isn't a one-time thing. This is our plan. This is going to be our future. We're going to be doing this for a while. And that was just wild and crazy to most people. There are some people out there, especially in European countries and stuff, that do this gap year thing when they're really young and they're just super dirt cheap traveling, backpack style for a year, and then they settle down and get a real job, right? But I think like Jared said, most people look at this well, when I get to retirement, and maybe I could just retire a little bit early, instead of 65, maybe 60 or late 50s, and then I could travel. But I think a lot of times either health problems get in the way or life gets in the way. You have kids and you have a mortgage and you have all this stuff then, so you don't necessarily do it the way you say you're going to do it. So I think it's really amazing that we've been able to, and other travel therapists have been able to capitalize on this career choice to do that early in our careers. And for us, it's just been unimaginably great. I mean, we've been to over half the U.S. states. After our road trip coming up next month, we'll probably have been to maybe 46 of the states. We will have been to over 30 countries. And we've also had a lot of other stuff besides travel. Like Jared said, we spent a lot of time hiking and working on diet and fitness and exercise, spending more time with family even, because when we are home, we're home for a while and we don't have work. So we'll get to spend a whole month with our families, seeing them quite often. So it's different than when you live there permanently and you kind of take for granted that your family's nearby and your friends are nearby. So it's just different, but we've been able to do a lot of cool things in our kind of semi-retirement. Yeah,
and being a travel therapist, you can kind of design this however you want. It could be 3 months on, 3 months off. It could be 6 months on, 6 months off. You can really set things up however you want. And like I said, if we could go back, me especially, I would have done things differently. I think instead of working a ton the first 3 years trying to save a lot, I would have probably worked 1 year, saved a lot that first year, and then started doing 3 months on, 3 months off, or 6 months on, 6 months off starting at year 2 when we were younger. Because right now what's happened, I mean, it's been great and everything, but that 3 years that we worked nonstop trying to save a ton, we're older now. We're much closer to when we probably need to start trying to have kids. And that means that limits our amount of time. We're kind of racing against the clock to try to see as much as possible internationally and domestically, trying to travel as much as we can early before we have kids. And kind of, it's almost like we spent 2 extra years working when we really could have spent more time off, which seems kind of crazy, but that's definitely the path that I think would have been better for us and probably is better for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think you have to look at what we're going to talk about today and see how it would fit into whatever stage of life you're in right now. If you're a student or you're just about to graduate or you're within your first couple of years of your career, depending on what your goals are, if you have a significant other, if you want to settle down, have a family, that sort of thing, like Jared said, maybe just the 1 year and then go to this sometime on, sometime off model earlier, because I know there's a lot of people out there that don't plan to do travel therapy forever.
Yeah.
So it's not realistic to say oh yeah, work full time for 3 years as a travel therapist and then indefinitely just be a travel therapist on and off forever, because a lot of people are just I want to do travel therapy for a couple of years and then I plan to just settle down and have a normal life, and that's fine too. Also, some of you guys might already be a few years into your career, so you have to just kind of pick this up and now be could I take a little more time off in doing travel therapy, even if it's more moderate, just work one contract, take a month off, that sort of thing. Or maybe you're somebody who's later in your career and you're looking at this like, oh yeah, I've already had the house and the family and all that stuff, and now I'm like, actually could almost be close to retirement. And if you have the freedom at that point to do like a destination contract and then take some time off, then you have a lot of lifestyle flexibility there. It just depends on what stage you are in your life and how you want to apply this information. But we're going to explain a little bit about how it kind of works financially, and just some of the strategies that we've used to get to where we are to be able to afford to do this.
Yeah, so most people watching are probably thinking, or listening, are probably thinking, wow, yeah, that sounds wonderful, but how can you possibly take 6 months a year off? How does that make sense financially? And what I've figured out over the years is if I run the calculations, I wrote an article probably 3 or 4 years ago talking about working only half the year. And what I figured out is that working 6 months as a travel therapist, I make almost the same amount as I would working a permanent job 12 months a year. And that's in our area, full-time pay is not very high, and we work outpatient. So pay in our area is not great. So with travel therapy, we still work outpatient contracts, but I can make in 6 months what I would about make in 12 months. And the difference there is only about $2,000 a year. And in reality, as a travel therapist, expenses for us are pretty low, at least between contracts when we're not paying duplicate housing expenses. So we have learned to buy less, save more of our money as travel therapists. So that extra $2,000 that I would make at a permanent job is probably offset by lower expenses throughout the year. So from someone that's working a permanent job, if you consider travel therapy, in reality, you're probably not making that much more money in 12 months as a permanent therapist as you are in 6 months as a travel therapist, depending on what setting, what location, and those kind of factors you're looking at.
Yeah, I think a lot of people might look at our story and they might not know all the details, and they might think a few things. They might think, well, you guys are just rich. Like maybe you had a lot of money already. Maybe you have rich parents, maybe you whatever. Or maybe they think, well, it's because you're both travel PTs and you both have the potential to earn a high salary. Or maybe it's because you both have a blog and like a website and you just make money online. But we want to explain that it's not all of those things. One, we were like super broke when we started. We don't just have rich families. We don't just have a lot of money. Yes, we do both have the potential to earn high incomes because we're a pair, but you can totally make this work on one travel therapist salary. It can totally be done. It would just might be scaled a little bit different in terms of how you design your lifestyle. And then in terms of the blog and the website income and all that, we make a little bit of money online, but that's not how we would have actually been able to do this without taking all of that into consideration. Because in fact, at year 3, when Jared was like, hey, let's do this thing, and we're gonna like only work half the year, we barely even had an online business at that point. Like it was there, but it was minimal.
Yeah.
So Jared created all of his calculations just based on his income from working as a travel therapist. So you can totally do it too. And then I want to reiterate what Jared said about having kind of like this minimalist lifestyle. So I don't know if you guys have heard us talk about before. There's a podcast we really like. It's called Choose FI. It stands for Choose Financial Independence. If you're interested in any of this financial independence stuff, I highly recommend you guys go and listen to it. It's not about therapy or anything like that, but I love that they just tell different people's stories. And I think from each podcast, you can learn a little bit from different people and the way they've done different things. And there was this one podcast that really resonated with me where it was 2 people working normal, middle class to lower middle class salaried jobs. And they were talking about their spending habits and how when they changed their mindset, and actually one of the two of the pair went and started working part-time, they actually decreased their spending a lot because what the woman, she referred to it as like spending triggers. And I want to talk a little bit about what that means, like spending triggers. So I think a lot of you can relate that when you're working 40-hour weeks, when you're really stressed, when you're really feeling kind of like that burnout, you actually probably spend a lot of money you don't need to spend on things of convenience, like eating out. Or say you went to the grocery store and you bought all these groceries for the week and you had really good intentions of meal prepping, but then when you got home after like a 10-hour day, you were just like, it would be so much easier to order takeout. And then you almost end up spending double on your food budget because now you've wasted all the groceries in the fridge and now you're also spending a lot of money doing things for convenience. And I think there's a lot of other examples where like vacations, like talk about like vacation budgeting versus long-term travel budgeting.
Yeah. taking a short trip, we found with family and friends that when you take a short trip, if you only have 1 or 2 weeks off per year, usually people spend a lot of money on that trip. And the reason for that is flights are expensive. So getting to and from a location, especially somewhere in like Europe or Asia, a more exotic place, I guess, from the United States, those flights are expensive. So you have to pay for a round trip flight and you're only there for a week, usually, or maybe 2 weeks. And usually people also will go to resorts. They want to pack as much in during that time as possible. Whereas if you travel for long periods of time, like we have 4 or 5 months at a time, you can travel a lot slower. You still have the same flight there and back, but that's spread out over a much longer period of time. So when you average that cost in over the period of time, your daily cost is much less for a longer trip. In addition, you don't feel like you have to do something every single day when you're going to be somewhere a longer period of time. You don't feel like you have to pack everything in, so you can spend less there. You can also spend less if you get discounts on like Airbnb stays. Usually Airbnbs will offer a discount if you stay for more than 6 days in one place, so or 7 days sometimes. And so you can get discounts there compared to like staying in a hotel and paying a nightly rate, or an Airbnb and paying a nightly rate.
Yeah, so I think the key point here is that when you have a lifestyle where you have more time off of work, you can actually travel a lot cheaper than you think, because the mind shift is just different there. So a lot of the strategies Jared talked about are how we are able to travel long term for a lot cheaper. But the other thing is just the mentality of it, because I think that a lot of people who work a typical American 50-week-a-year job, 40 plus hours a week, when they know that they only have 2 weeks off, they're like, well, I make a pretty high income or whatever, and I deserve to take this trip. I deserve to do that excursion, and I deserve to get that, drink package all-inclusive upgrade. And so they end up spending like thousands of dollars because they know that every year they're only going to get those 2 weeks. And I have a lot of friends that are like this, who spend way more money on their 2-week vacation, or their 1 week and then later that year another week vacation, than we spend in 5 months when we're abroad. And I'm not kidding you. Like, Jared writes about our entire travel budget whenever we travel, and you can travel so much cheaper than you think when your mentality is shifted from like, wow, I'm on this like 1 week epic vacation, I got to do everything. And when you spread out those costs on a daily basis over a longer period, we've written a lot of articles about, or Jared's written a lot of articles about that. So it's honestly true. Like, you can spend so much less and travel for so much cheaper. The other big point here on just kind of talking about some strategies of how we've been able to make it work is credit card points. So we use a lot of points to be able to take trips rather than paying in cash.
Yeah. Credit card rewards are a huge benefit for us. And we've collected, I think right now we have over 1.3 million points. And that's in addition to a ton we've used over the years from credit card bonuses that we've done over the years. And flights in and out of the country, we end up getting for free with credit card points. Last year in Europe, I think we got like 21 free hotel nights, which makes a huge difference. Our trip to Asia, we got a bunch of free hotel nights. So that is definitely a big factor in keeping our expenses low when we take these long trips.
Yeah, so travel can be so much more affordable than you guys think. So if you are able to design a lifestyle where you're able to cut out part of your work, where you're not having to be at a job 52 weeks a year, it will allow you to take some of these longer trips and have some really lasting memories. Or even if, maybe your lifestyle is a little bit different and you're not so interested in these long international trips, even some really cool road trips, because if you only have that 1 or 2 weeks a year, there's so many places in the US, and you might feel like, okay, if I want to see the Grand Canyon, or I want to go to Utah and see a couple of the parks there, well, you're probably going to be like, well, I probably have to like fly there and then just only be there at that one little place for like a week. But we're about to take like an 8-week road trip across the US and see so much cool stuff. And like, who else can take 8 weeks off?
Yeah.
And it's going to not be that expensive. I mean, you can travel pretty cheaply within the US if you just got your car and you just fill up the tank with gas and go. So there's just a lot of flexibility that's built in when you're able to take that mandatory 52-week-a-year work part out of the equation.
Yep. So a very key point here is that in order to make any of this work is that you have to live a pretty frugal life. It doesn't have to be extremely frugal. I think over the years we've been a little bit extreme in what we've done, but it does not have to be like that at all. In reality, we could sustain our lifestyle from the very beginning on less than one contract per year, which is kind of insane, but we keep our expenses very low. For most people, I don't think that's reasonable, but I do think that 2 contracts per year is enough that you can cover all of your expenses for the year and also still save a little bit of money, especially if you work that full first year and save a ton there and have investments that are also growing over time.
Yeah. I think budgeting is a big question that comes up. I know a lot of people who are students or who are earlier in their career, they look at us and they say, how do you budget for your lifestyle to even know where to start? Like, numbers are hard for them. Numbers are hard for me. I'm not a big numbers person. I'm not a big finance person. But I think there's a few key points here. Just keeping your fixed expenses low. If you want to talk about a budget, all it is just like, what bills do you have to pay every month? Like, what fixed expenses do you have to pay every month? I think we benefit because we live in a relatively low cost of living area. We've never really been big city people. I recognize that if you are somebody who has grown up in a bigger city or you like to live in bigger cities, your costs are going to be higher. But the point of what we're talking about here is it's all about lifestyle choices. So if you're choosing to live in the bigger cities and have this higher cost of living, then you're making a choice there versus being able to have this lifestyle flexibility. Because if you have to have a $500,000 mortgage house or a $2,000 a month rent apartment, then a lot of your paycheck every month is going to that. So for us, we always maintained a really low cost of living back home. For the first several years of our career, we just used our parents' houses as our tax home. So if you're looking into travel therapy or you are a travel therapist, hopefully at this point you're familiar with the concept of a tax home, but you do need to have a house. You can't just be a gypsy. You need a place of permanent residence. And so we didn't keep a house or an apartment where we had like big monthly payments. We just paid our parents to like keep our stuff at their house. So our fixed expenses were super low there. And then when you look at your other fixed expenses, like your cell phone bill and your grocery bill and do you have a car payment or do you own your car, and that sort of thing. So just think about keeping your expenses low. And I do think that when you're a traveler, you learn to live a little more minimalist lifestyle because you recognize that experiences and things like that mean more to you than stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's pretty much universal between travel therapists, is that you try to live as minimally as possible, because packing and moving is such a pain that you take as little as you can, and you don't buy a bunch of extra stuff because it's a pain. And you really start to enjoy the experiences that you have all around the country. And I think you can take that into the rest of your life, even if you start working a permanent job later on, to still live minimally and still save a lot, which is vital for any of this.
Yeah, because all of our hobbies and our activities and things we'd like to do are like pretty much free. Like, we'd like to go to the gym, we like to go hiking, we just like to hang out with our friends, and like, if you do go out drinking and having, nice meals, we just try to only do that maybe once a week or once every other week. We just try not to eat out too much every single week because it does add up. So you just find that, a lot of the experiences you can have in life don't cost a lot of money. And I think we're both naturally like fairly frugal. I mean, Jared would argue that I'm not frugal compared to him, but I think I'm frugal compared to a lot of people. Like, I've never been a super materialistic girl. I was always taught to like shop the sale racks, and I love TJ Maxx and I love anything on clearance. So I'm not really big into designer stuff and like really expensive stuff. And Jared's always been like super low cost when it comes to buying used cars and not worrying about having the fanciest car and signing up for, a lot of people will be like, well, I can afford that. But when you say I can afford that, you're giving up something else. If you sign up for buying a brand new car and you have a car payment that is $200, $300 a month, well, that's taking $200 or $300 a month from your vacation budget or your retirement budget or your budget for something else. So you're choosing having this fancy car over having these experiences.
Yep.
So I think that's super important to think about.
All right, so let's talk about, we actually made a whole video about reducing expenses as a travel therapist. I think that was 2 or 3 weeks ago. So if you want more information about budgeting, reducing expenses, that's a good video to watch. Let's talk about student loans. So that's usually a payment that a lot of permanent therapists have and travel therapists, all therapists have student loan payments pretty much. But there are some ways that travel therapists can reduce that expense, at least monthly. And I've written a lot about this in the past as well. But going on an income-based repayment plan as a travel therapist, it's possible to get your student loan payment down to very low or even $0 a month. and that's because our taxable income is low. And in addition to the taxable income, if you're working only half the year, your taxable income will probably be, so you're already making less as a taxable income, but then working only half the year makes your taxable income incredibly low. So low that in our case, if you just contribute a little bit of money to retirement accounts on top of that, you can get to a $0 payment. And what that means under a plan like Revised Pay As You Earn, the REPAY plan, is that your interest is accruing, but it's only accruing at about half of the normal rate of your interest rate. So for me, my normal interest rate is about 6%. If I have a $0 a month payment, my interest rate is accruing at 3%. That's my effective interest rate. And the reason for that is under Revised Pay As You Earn, half of the interest accrued every month is subsidized by the borrower? No, not the borrower. I can't remember the name. I guess the student loan servicer. That's it. Half of it is subsidized by them. So even though your interest is accruing, it's at a much smaller rate, and usually you can save and invest and earn a higher rate of return from investments than you can from your student loans. And so that $0 a month payment, after 25 years of making payments under REPAY, the student loans are forgiven. So that is a path that we chose, and we would not have been able to do that really if we were not travel therapists.
Yeah, it's kind of a loophole that not a lot of people really get, because they think, well, income-driven repayment means you have to make a low income. Like, that's for people who got degrees in, I don't know, something that they couldn't get a job in, and then they have like $300,000 in student loan debt, and then they have a job that pays them $15,000 a year. It's for those people, right? Well, it's kind of a loophole, because as travel therapists, only part of your pay is taxed, and you only have to pay your student loan repayment based on your taxable income. And then especially on top of that, if you're like us and you only work part of the year, you're only working 6 months or 9 months a year, then your AGI, your adjusted gross income, looks low for the whole year, because it's only based on your taxable. And so you really qualify, it's a loophole, you qualify for these student loan forgiveness programs. And there's this whole moral thing of like, should you do that or not? It's up to you. But if you want to know how we've been able to do it, that's how we've been able to do it. And Jared's written a ton of articles about it. So that's just one of the factors, because I think when people are looking at budgeting, especially when you get out of school, a lot of you, like, a huge part of your budget is like the student loan payment every month. Hello, how are you saving so much money to travel the world and all this stuff if you're paying these student loans? So the answer is we're not. So if you're interested in learning more about that, if you think that you would qualify, if it's a route that you want to go, then you can read Jared's articles about it. But we're not saying that's the only way. That's one small piece of the big picture, because there are a ton of travel therapists out there that are able to do it all. They pay off all their student loans in their first 3 years of traveling, and then they start investing, and then they start getting a little more flexible with their lifestyle, and maybe they take off 4 weeks a year instead of 2, but they're still living a pretty cool lifestyle compared to working a perm job. So you have to sway it for what fits your life. I know that we're a little bit extreme in what we've been able to do, but that is one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, and originally that was our plan, to try to pay off the loans as quickly as possible. And it wasn't until I ran the math, I looked at the income-based repayment plans, found Revised Pay As You Earn, and realized how beneficial that would be for us as travel therapists, and for pretty much any travel therapist. And it just made sense mathematically to go that route. But yes, you can easily also pay down your debt quickly, then start saving, and then start taking time off. That will work as well.
So what if you have other debts? We were pretty fortunate in that the only type of debt that we had coming into this whole travel therapy thing was student loans. But we understand that's not everybody's situation. Everybody comes from different backgrounds. Maybe you had some credit card debt. Maybe you have a big car payment, all that. So you do want to manage your debts before you look into moving into this lifestyle flexibility thing. So you have to look at your overall financial plan and say, okay, I have this credit card, whatever it might be, $5,000 or something, that's at 20% interest. Get that paid down at first. Check that off your list before you start looking into moving into some lifestyle flexibility and all that. But we're telling you, you are capable of making really, really good money. And if you make, as a travel therapist, if you make smart choices, you can pay down those debts in the beginning and then move towards putting a significant chunk of money towards saving and having this flexible lifestyle.
Yeah, getting rid of consumer debt like that, either card debt, credit card debt, those kind of things, even private student loan debt, that's all vital as quickly as possible. Things like federal student loan debt where income-based and potential forgiveness is an option, and mortgage debt, that's a little bit different. Usually they're lower interest rates, probably not as vital to get rid of, but credit card debt, high interest rate debt is always try to get rid of that as soon as possible.
Absolutely. And if you are like us and you are a student who's starting to learn about this stuff, or you're a brand new grad and you've been fortunate to not get yourself into any of these consumer debts, right now, keep that habit. Like, don't go out and be like, oh yeah, I make a salary now, I'm going to buy this new car and get this huge house and all this stuff. Like, avoid getting yourself into debt early so you can set yourself off on a good financial path, because we meet so many people who I think we almost forget, like, we were just fortunate because we didn't get ourselves in that rabbit hole. And we meet so many people that are like, well, I still have all this debt and all this. And we're like, oh gosh, yeah, you got to take care of that first. You got to check that box first before you can move on to do all these cool things with your life. So that's a big piece of it. The other piece I want to talk about is, I think we skim over like budgeting because we save so much. We don't actually really have to budget down to the T. And I think that you guys can do it too. If you get out of school right away and start earning this high salary, I mean, Jared was saving like 90% of his income, and I was saving at least 60 to 70%. And it's just so opposite of our mindset to know what it would be like to be living a job where you're just working a job and living where you're just at your means. Because what's a typical thing to save, like 5% of your income? Like
5 to 10%, I think, is the average in the U.S.
And that concept to us is just wild, because with our career in travel therapy and like keeping our expenses low, we've just been able to save a huge chunk of our money to put aside for savings and investing and travel for fun and living this lifestyle. So if you start yourself off on a good foot when you get started and start earning this high income, you can do a lot with that money.
Yeah, and really what we did from the very beginning is, instead of budgeting every dollar, I came up with an amount that we both wanted to target each month to save, and then we would take that amount out of our pay instantly. Every week we would just take that amount out, invest it, and then we would just live on whatever was left. And I felt like we still had a really, a good lifestyle. We did a lot of travel, even during contracts. We went on a lot of weekend trips and things like that. We ate out pretty often. So it wasn't like a extremely difficult budget to have, but I look at it as, instead of a budget, it's like an anti-budget. You save first and then you spend the rest. So you just give yourself almost an allowance of money to spend, all the rest going towards investing.
Yeah, I do think there's a lot of people that probably look at what we do and they're like, Jared, you saved 90% of your income.
It was between 80 and 90.
Okay, whatever. High amount of your income. And, I saved a high amount too. Y'all must just not do anything. You must just sit at home and you must not spend any money and you must not ever buy anything. That's not true. Like, I still buy new stuff. I have a car that's like relatively new. I bought it 1 year old in 2016. It wasn't brand new, it was used, but I bought like a pretty nice car that, knock on wood, we haven't had any problems with. It's got us from A to B all over the country. I still buy clothes and shoes sometimes. We still go to movies when that was allowed, and dinners and stuff like that. Like, we don't live so frugal that we don't enjoy our lives, but I think those big ticket items, like not having a high mortgage, not having a car payment, not having credit card debt, all that stuff makes a huge difference. So focus on that stuff, and then get down into like the nitty gritty, like my food budget and my clothing budget and that kind of stuff, if it's necessary.
Yeah. So another thing, in addition to student loan payments being low, if you're a travel therapist with a low adjusted gross income, and then you're only working half the year, chances are your taxable income is somewhere only around $20,000 to $25,000 a year for most travel therapists. If you contribute a little bit of money to retirement accounts, not only do you get your student loan payment extremely low, but your federal tax burden is extremely low. There's been a few years that we were working where we would owe $0 in federal taxes, and that was from not working full years and contributing to retirement accounts. So if you think about a permanent job where you're making, say, $70,000 a year, how much of that goes to federal taxes? It's a pretty decent chunk. But if you're working as a travel therapist only half the year, your federal tax burden is going to be pretty low, as well as your state, obviously. So that is a big factor there. So your after-tax income actually increases a little bit on a weekly basis when you work less, because your tax rate is lower, if that makes sense.
I never knew any of this. And if you've watched our videos before, like, you will know that Jared knows so much more about taxes and finance and just all this stuff than I do. It never occurred to me that, like, when you got out of school and you started making money, that you had any control over how much like the government taxes you. Like there are actually strategies to lower what Jared's calling your tax burden, the amount of taxes you have to pay. And you can actually take advantage of a lot of these, I like to call them loopholes, because I just think like, wow, like is that like, it's funny, we use a website called Tax Act to file our taxes, and they have this new little slogan this year. It was like, surprisingly legal. And I'm like, this is surprisingly legal, what we do. And so it's great. Like the whole low AGI, low adjusted gross income, when you work as a traveler, if you are current travelers watching this, you probably already get this. If you're new to travel, we've done our videos about like how the pay works. Only part of your pay is taxed, and only that part that's taxed is what the government looks at for your student loan payment, your taxable income, so how much taxes you pay. We're also going to get into talking about your insurance, your health insurance payment if you go through a government Affordable Care Act, healthcare.gov plan. So there's just all these little things that you benefit a lot by having this tax-free stipend money that we get as travelers. And then the whole like investing in your 401k and those sort of things that lowers your taxes at the end of the year. Jared was recently teaching like a family member about this, because like they didn't know. They just thought like, well, each year the government says I owe this much, so I pay this much. And we're like, well, that money you have in a savings account, you could put it into a 401k. Or whatever,
traditional IRA,
or an IRA,
health savings account.
Yeah, whatever type of retirement account you're eligible for, and that will lower your taxes for the year. Of course, you can't get that money right now. Like you have to wait, and that's saving money for your future. But instead of saving it in a bank account, if you can afford to put it aside for the future in an IRA or 401k, it's going to decrease the amount of taxes you have to give the government that year.
Yep. All right. So now, since Whitney mentioned health insurance, let's talk about that. Being a travel therapist, I think we have another advantage in that we can keep our health insurance payments low compared to what the average is, especially if you're working only 6 months a year. Again, because if you go through the Affordable Care Act marketplace, your health insurance payment is based on your modified adjusted gross income. And if you're working as a travel therapist with lower income, lower taxable income, and only working half the year, that health insurance payment is very low. So most people are very concerned about not working, because if they're not working, they don't have employer-sponsored health insurance, which means that your payment can be extremely high. But for us with a low income, working only part of the year, chances are your health insurance payment is going to be probably in the $100 to $200 range. That's what we've paid the last couple of years for our health insurance. So while we're on contract, we take insurance through the travel company, which is usually pretty affordable because it's subsidized partially by the travel company itself. And then between contracts, when we're traveling internationally or doing whatever, we go on the ACA plan and get subsidies there. So our health insurance payment is also low. So all of this goes back to keeping expenses low. Working only half the year, working as a traveler, you have lower taxes, lower student loan payment, lower health insurance costs. All of those things end up allowing you to save more money and being able to travel and do more things.
So I'm going to just do a Cliff Notes summary of what we talked about. When people say, how do you do it? How can you possibly only work 6 months a year and afford to not work a full year? Like how? Okay, so here's the Cliff Notes of it. 6 months as a travel therapist, in our case, is about the same income as 12 months as a regular therapist. So just that there is like, it's about the same.
And that's factoring in that lower tax burden. So this is looking at after-tax income. As a permanent therapist, you obviously pay a much higher percentage in taxes than you would as a traveler working only 6 months a year with already low taxable income.
Yeah.
So after-tax income, working 12 months a year as a permanent therapist, in our area would only be about $2,000 or more per year than working 6 months as a travel therapist for us.
Yep.
So that is huge.
So you can, roughly speaking, make about the same as a travel therapist in 6 months as 12 months, maybe a little bit less, but then it's further offset by lower tax burden, so you're not paying as much taxes. If you go on income-driven repayment plan, lower student loan payment, and then what was the other one?
Health insurance.
Lower health insurance if during that time off you qualify for subsidies because of your low income and your low tax burden. It's going to have a lower health insurance plan. And then compound all that by saying, okay, if you can live a pretty frugal life and have low expenses in general, live a pretty minimal life, now you have higher income, lower expenses, 6 months off. There you go. So that's basically in a nutshell how we have been able to do it and how y'all can totally do it. Or as we're going to talk about kind of moving forward, if 6 months on and 6 months off sounds too extreme for you, we're going to totally talk about how you could just tailor it, like having more than 2 weeks off a year, which is what so many travel therapists do. I know Sierra is watching, and we talked earlier, and she's like, I basically kind of already do something like that. Like she takes off a month here, a month there. Next thing you know, she's taken off 3 to 4 months in the whole year already. So she's basically doing it. She's just not calling it semi-retirement like we are.
Exactly.
So, yeah, like I said, so kind of just what could it look like for you? I think you need to sit back and look at your life and the special considerations of how this could fit your lifestyle, because maybe you're on the other side of the screen, and you're not a travel PT who's dating another travel PT and doesn't have any life responsibilities at home. Like maybe you have kids, maybe you have a significant other who can't travel, maybe you have a significant other who doesn't do therapy, maybe you are single and looking for a significant other and you want to settle down and you don't plan to travel forever. So let's address like how all those things might play into this. So I do think obviously if you are a travel PT pair or a travel nurse pair or healthcare pair, like that's the optimal situation, because then your significant other has the same flexibility you do, has a pretty high earning income as you do, has the same tax benefits that you do. Great. Well, I totally think it's doable though if you're a solo travel therapist. So I'll say our friend Sierra, we chatted with her earlier, she's totally already almost doing this. Our friend Dylan basically does this too. He just doesn't do it like 6 and 6. He does like a contract, take a couple months off, a contract, take a couple months off. Totally doable if you do the same things, like just divide it in half. You know, if I just traveled by myself and I kept my expenses pretty low the way I do, I could still afford to travel and take time off and do whatever I wanted all the time. So I think it would be just as easy as a solo travel therapist who's single. But what I want to say is I know that there's a lot of you out there that are single that are like, well, I don't want to do this forever, right? Like eventually I probably want to settle down. So I think that's where Jared said, like, start doing it sooner would be super realistic. Like just do 1 year, 4 back-to-back contracts, save a buttload of money that first year, and then start doing your 1 or 2 or 3 months off. And then maybe your whole travel career is only 3 to 4 years. And then after that, you settle down and do the normal lifestyle thing. Still totally doable.
Yeah. And what we found over the years is that most people reaching out to us that are interested in travel therapy are younger. They're early in their career. Maybe they're even students thinking about traveling as new grads like we did. And I think that is the perfect time in your life to take long periods of time off to explore other areas of interest and explore the world. So depending on your situation, yes, work a year, try to save some money, then start maybe working 3 months on, 3 months off, travel, explore the things you're interested in. And I think that sets you up for a great position for later in life when you do have to settle down and take a permanent job or something like that.
Yeah. Super doable for that solo young travel therapist. It could also be super doable. We've certainly met a lot of people who are later in life. Maybe they are also single. Maybe they're a divorcee and they find their kids are out of the house and they're like, hey, I'm single. I can do this. I can go anywhere. I don't have any ties. My kids are off at college. They're grown. They have their own kids. So that could totally be the same situation for you where you're like, wow, I can still do this. I could go take a 3-month travel contract and then take 3 months off. So super doable for a solo traveler. Now, say you are the travel therapist or the person who's a therapist that wants to do travel therapy, but your significant other isn't a therapist. How does this work for you? So a few things that I can think of here. We know some folks who their significant other can do something remotely. We know lots of couples who travel and do travel healthcare, and their significant other travel healthcare, and their significant other can work remotely. Like maybe they work online or they teach online or they just do something that they don't have to be tied down to one place. Totally doable. Like our friend Catherine and her husband.
Yep.
Or Skip and Jazz.
Yep.
The other thing we could think about is there are some couples that if you keep your expenses low enough, you could afford to live on just one income. Like, I think it's totally doable to live on one income as a travel therapist and support a significant other who doesn't work or who maybe just picks up like small side gigs but doesn't really have like a career on the road, but just is able to earn a small amount of income. Totally doable.
Yeah.
The other thing is what about that guy? When I wrote this one down, I was thinking about the guy that when you were a student at Lewis Gale and he worked there and he worked like 6 months and then he came home for 6 months. and basically he didn't travel for fun on his 6 months off. He just came back at home. He just had a house and a garden and a yard and family.
Yeah, and I asked him, I remember back then, this is before I knew anything about financial independence or anything like that. I was still a student, hadn't really researched anything. And he was saying, well, I usually work like 6 months and I take 6 months off. And I was like, well, what would you do during 6 months off? And he was like, oh, I do all kinds of things. I play guitar, I work in my yard, I work on house projects, I go on hikes, I do all this stuff. And I was like, I don't know. Maybe I could do something like that. That was kind of the very first time that I ever thought that maybe something like that would be possible, and maybe it would even be a beneficial thing to do.
So I don't remember whether or not he had a family, but it would still work, because we do know, I've talked to some other ones who it's like they have a significant other and maybe even kids at home, and like they have a normal suburban lifestyle. And then if they're willing to go and take like 1 or 2 travel contracts a year, even if it's not that far away, like what if they were just willing to take another job 3 hours away from home where they could still come home on the weekends and see their families? I mean, there's so many careers that people do that, like electricians and stuff like that just go for a couple months and they go away from home to work. And then they're basically making a lot of money and still coming back. So they could still go away if you're willing, if that's something that works for you and your lifestyle, to leave the family at home, go off and work 1 or 2 travel contracts a year. And then when you come home, you are like undivided attention to your family. And maybe your spouse only has the 2 weeks off a year, but that's okay, because you're still getting to do so many rewarding things on your 6 months off at home. Spend more time with your kids, maybe pay less in daycare, because maybe when mom or dad is home from being a travel therapist, you watch the kids. That sort of thing. And then maybe it just allows you to fulfill your life in other ways, like, side hustles or other hobbies or things. Maybe it's not just traveling that you want to do in your semi-retirement, but other hobbies that allow you to still be home with your family. So those are situations where I could see it could still work.
Yeah. I think for people in that type of situation with a family, it might seem kind of crazy to be away for 3 months, but yeah, if you're not that far away and you can still come home on weekends, still see your family, and then have an entire 3-month period where you're off the whole time to spend with the family, I think that can really be a beneficial thing. Because if you think about it, how much time do parents actually spend with their kids when they're working 8 hours a day, cooking dinner, doing all these extra things, doing errands and things like that? It's usually not a huge amount of time, and there's research on that. Showing that quality time spent with kids are actually pretty low. But if you had 3 months off where you could just do nothing but spend time with kids and family, then I think that can actually turn out to be a better situation.
Yeah. So those are some specific scenarios we could think of. The other one I want to talk about is there are certain people that do travel with a significant other and with children. Again, I think this is the easiest if both of you are healthcare travelers and can do what we do, and we just had a child, like especially a young child, who could come with. We definitely know a travel PT pair, Stephen and Ellen, that do that. They travel with their little girl. They're both travel PTs, and they make it work. We've also met other people where one person works and the other person comes with the small children. Everybody comes as a family, and the other person maybe is a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home dad. And maybe they do some kind of homeschooling, or maybe you only do it for when the children are from ages 0 to 5. So it's totally doable, and there are ways you can design your lifestyle even if you do have a family. Or maybe you have a situation where, again, you could be the spouse who goes away and works for a couple months and comes back, but your significant other is already a stay-at-home parent. So then when you do get your 3 months off, you and the whole family can go and do something for 3 months because the other spouse already doesn't work or already has flexibility. And one more scenario I will say is, what if you are I'm later in my career and your significant other has a job or has a career that they have already retired from. We know a therapist who's like this, who she only works sometimes because this was kind of like a later in life, like we're just going to do it for fun thing. Her significant other, Caroline, as I'm thinking of, doesn't work. And he's retired, and so she just goes and they do travel contracts. He comes with her, and she just does like 3 months, and then they come back for like 6 months, and they just hang out and they play with their dog and they do whatever they want. And then she goes and does another 3 months, and he goes with her because he's already retired. So many cool things that you can think about and just play around with your life, and you don't have to do the same little thing that your family and friends have always done. So those are just some ideas for you guys that are looking at this like, well, we're not like you, so we can't do it exactly how you did it.
Yeah, and that's the whole point with all these scenarios, is that there's a lot of flexibility there as a travel therapist, and you can try to make this work a variety of different ways. But I think almost universally having some time off is a beneficial thing. Most countries in the world get 4 to 8 weeks off per year. And so as a travel therapist, we actually have the ability to do that like most other countries and take more time off and avoid the burnout.
Yeah, so I think we've alluded to this a lot, but just when you're looking at it in a purely like, how am I going to structure my lifestyle? We have done like a super extreme work 3 full years back to back to back. We only took like 1 or 2 weeks off our first couple of years. And then we just only basically worked, we said we were going to do 1 to 2 contracts a year. It's really just been more like 1 3-month contract.
1 or 0.
Or 0 for Jared. And so it's like 6 to 9 to 12 months off. So we're doing it a little bit extreme. What Jared has suggested as what we think might be a really, really optimal situation if you're starting your career is work 1 full year as a travel therapist, 4 back-to-back contracts, make that money, save that money. Then immediately from there on year 2, start doing 3 months on, 3 months off. The reason why we think 3 months on, 3 months off would be really great is you work 1 contract and then you get a whole 3 months to travel. If traveling internationally is one of your goals, because like Jared said, a huge benefit and like the way that we've been able to save so much money and travel cheaply is if you travel for a longer period, you stretch out those upfront costs of the flights on each end. So if you're the person who wants to be able to take big, big long trips like we have, I think the 3 months on, 3 months off would be good because you would get a whole 3-month period to travel, or it could be, a 1.5, 2 months, whatever it is. But I think 3 months is kind of the sweet spot. We almost found that internationally 4 to 5 months was like kind of a lot.
Yeah. I really think that we probably won't take as long of trips in the future because it does get tiring. I know that sounds ridiculous, but if you're traveling and taking nonstop flights and buses and things like that for multiple months, the first month or 2 is wonderful. You're all excited. You're almost like running on adrenaline, but it does get tiring later on. So I think more shorter international trips would have been better. So 2 or 3 months at a time, starting at year 2. I think we would have been much better off than doing these really long trips that we've done.
Yeah. And if you find that budget-wise that isn't working for you, I think another really reasonable thing to do would be like 6 months of work, 2 contracts back to back, and then followed by like more of a 2 to 3 months off, and then another 6 month. Break it up more like that. I also think the more frequent working in between will help to keep your skills sharper, because I will say, like, when we take a whole like 6 to 9 months off, it's a long time, and then you get back in the clinic and you're like, I don't even really know if I know how to do this anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's why that first year, especially as a new grad, is vital, to work a full year and really kind of cement your skills and your confidence as a therapist. Because if you jump right into working 3 months and then taking 3 months off your first year, as a new grad, you're probably going to be very uncomfortable going back in the clinic after all that time off.
Yeah, so that's something to really keep in mind, is how fresh your skills are going to be. And we've also had people ask us, have we had questions or difficulties securing a job after taking that amount of time off? So far, we have not. But, you want to prepare for that. So maybe during your time off, some of that time is maybe spent doing continuing education or working on in some capacity. Like for us, we have our blog and our website. Maybe you have some kind of side hustle or some type of businessy thing that you do on the side that still keeps you sharp and fresh. So that's a good talking point during a phone interview as a travel therapist. And I think that if you frame it in a positive light, like, don't let it be a negative thing. If you just tell the person on the other end of the phone, who is probably a clinic director that works a normal 9 to 5, 52-week-a-year job, if you frame it in a positive light, like, I'm working on my self-care and enriching my life with travel and these experiences, and I think it makes me a more well-rounded person and clinician, they're just going to be like, wow. They're not going to be like, you suck because you didn't work the last 6 months and you're not sharp in your skills, but just make it sound like I'm the most amazing therapist you'll ever have at your clinic. Please hire me.
And that really depends on the hiring manager. I know I took 6 months off in 2018, and then, or no, more than that, like 8 months off, and then went back to work in 2019, and the interviewer had no problems with that. He just asked me like what I was doing. I explained that I was still staying up with continuing education and traveling, and explained about the websites and things like that, and he was completely fine with that.
Yeah, they were just like, wow, that's awesome. Like, when can you start? But I could see where, like, occasionally we have heard from other people that they were like, well, you have this big gap in your work history, maybe you're not the sharpest therapist. So just have an answer for that if it does come up. But some people, I think, too, like one more little thing I want to say about if you decide to design your lifestyle in this manner. We talked about this on our financial independence video, and Jared wrote an article about how we did experience some struggles of like structuring our time and being off a schedule when we take these longer periods of time off, because maybe your whole life you've had a structure, you've had a schedule, you've had school, you've had your 9-to-5 job, and now like maybe you don't feel fulfilled in if you take 3 or 6 whole months off. So for some people, if one big chunk of time to travel internationally is not your goal in your semi-retirement, if it's more just to have more time for yourself, more time for your family, more time for these other things, maybe you might feel better with just a 2-week break, a 3-week break, a 1-month break, a 6-week break, like shorter periods of time rather than just this big long chunk of time off. So
For sure.
I just think our take-home message here is don't look at your life as I have to work continuously around the clock to be able to sustain my lifestyle and pay my bills. Like if you look at your budget, if you look at your finances, and if you decide to pursue travel therapy, there's so many other ways you can design your lifestyle. And we're here to tell you it can be done and you can do it. I think that's how we learned that it was possible. You know, Jared was out here listening to all these podcasts and reading these blogs of people who weren't necessarily therapists, but just other people out there doing cool things in their life. And he was like looking at the numbers like, we can do this. We can do cool things with our life. So you guys can do cool things with your lives too if you want to, if that's how you want to structure your life.
Yep. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it's a pretty long one and it's a little bit scattered, but if you're getting value from it, please like the video. If you listen to the podcast, subscribe to the podcast, comment. We always appreciate that.
Yeah. So we're going to go through a few comments for those of you guys that are watching it live on Facebook. If you want to leave us a comment, if you want to ask us a question, now's that time. If you are watching later, like on our YouTube channel or watching the replay, please feel free to leave us a comment as well. We will go back and read them later. And as always, if you have private questions for us, if you want to talk about things, send us a message. We're happy to help you. If you're just getting started with travel therapy and you want advice, we are here to mentor you through it. We can help get you set up with some recruiters and companies that we like if you're interested in that. And again, we've got a lot of articles that kind of explain this stuff in more of like a written format. I know it's a lot of numbers during some of the stuff that we're talking about, so we can certainly help you through that part as well.
So Kelsey says, this is really amazing. I love it. I'm wondering, do you think having a financial advisor is a good idea? I know it costs some fees, but my baseline understanding of finances is super low and I feel overwhelmed thinking about it. Ideally, I think that it doesn't take a ton of knowledge, probably just a few books and maybe some podcasts or blogs to get a baseline understanding of investing and saving. So I think that would be my first choice, is just to put a little bit of time into it. It'll make you feel better about the whole situation than just putting everything in someone else's hands. If you have no interest in that at all, though, I think a financial advisor can be a good person to use, but I would always go with someone that is fee-based, meaning that you just pay them an upfront fee. They give you advice, tell you, maybe you should try this, save this amount, whatever. You just pay them a flat rate. Instead of traditional financial advisors, you pay them a percentage of your investments each year. And to some people, that seems like a better idea because you don't directly see the money leave your bank account like you do with a fee. But when you're giving someone a percentage of the investments that they manage for you, they're more inclined to push you in a direction that suits them better instead of pushing you in a direction that suits you better. Whereas someone that's fee-based, you don't have to worry about that as much because they're getting paid the same amount. They don't have any skin in the game, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely a good question, because I think there's a lot of people out there, Kelsey, that are looking at this like, I don't have any financial advice. I'm a physical therapist. I'm an occupational therapist. I'm a speech therapist. I don't know. And a lot of people find comfort in having someone else look at their plan for them. So hopefully if you do maybe like a balance of both, like do some research on your own and then maybe go to like a 1 or 2 time situation with a financial advisor just to have them look over your plan or help you establish a plan. And then hopefully you move forward from there.
Yep.
Forrest says, I'm a new SLP traveler here. Thank you both for all the awesome weekly content. Your videos have been so informative in helping me navigate this lifestyle as well as plan for my future.
Awesome. Thanks for watching.
That's great. Thank you, Forrest.
Hey, Naya.
Hi, Naya. Thank you for watching.
Sierra, this was in response to traveling and doing this as a single individual. She says, right, I feel like it's super, super easy to do because I'm single, but I do plan on trying to continue to live this lifestyle even when I'm dating married. Yeah.
Thank you for your feedback, Sierra. I appreciate it. Because I know there's probably a lot of solo travelers out there wondering how this will fit their lifestyle. Andrea says, you guys make this so simple and realistic. Thank you. Thanks, Andrea. We try. Jared sometimes talks a little bit over my head and other people's heads, so I try to like rein him back in for like the non-financial people to just break it down, because honestly, I never, if you would have told me like 6 years ago that we'd be in the situation we're in now, it just doesn't even seem realistic to me.
Doesn't seem realistic to me either.
So I'm able to look at it and be like, hey, if we got here, like you can get here too.
Annabelle says, thank you. This is so informative. Thank you so much. Listening with my partner who is not a PT. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it because I felt like we were really scattered this week. So
well, we had a lot to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sierra said, I like the reverse budgeting idea. Definitely going to start doing that. Yeah, I think it works really well. I think that like keeping track of every expense and budgeting down to the dollar is really time consuming and tedious. I just don't enjoy that. So I like going the opposite direction of, all right, I save this amount, I can spend whatever's left.
Andrea, in terms of living frugally and activities, she says, we host game nights wherever our contracts are. It's a good way to make friends with our temporary coworkers, and it's super cheap.
Yeah, I think that's awesome.
Yeah, during this quarantine, we got super into board games and
Ticket to Ride, especially.
It's our favorite board game. So definitely a very low cost, fun activity. Throw in a couple beers and you've got yourself a fun night.
Yep.
All right. Andrea also says, yes, we do road trips. We've seen more national parks in the 2.5 years of traveling than most people see in their lifetime.
Yes, national parks in the U.S. are amazing. If you guys haven't traveled to at least some of the bigger national parks, definitely do that.
Sierra says, it blows my mind that 2 weeks of vacation a year is the accepted norm, right?
Yeah, it is crazy.
Yeah, that sucks. Okay.
Andrew said, as traveling therapists, we only work about 40 weeks per year, and not all of that is full time. With you on the cheap travel and travel hacking. Yeah, 40 weeks per year I think is a pretty good balance.
Yeah, Andrew, I'd be interested to know, how do you guys break up your 40 weeks a year? Is it just sort of random with how the job market goes, or do you plan it out?
Yep.
George says, my American dream is to own a pizza joint.
I think that's awesome.
I think you're well on your way, George. Like you're pretty much equal pizza maker and PTA.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Kelsey says, I love this idea. I get bored too easily in order to live that American dream that you described.
Us too.
Yeah, I hear you.
Us too. Even 3 months in one place, we start to get kind of bored.
Hey, Justin. Hey, Madison. Thank y'all for joining. So we'll see if anybody else has any questions.
Annabelle said, what do you guys invest in? We pretty much only invest in passive index funds, and that's why I was saying that I think to get the baseline knowledge is pretty simple. Investing passively, I mean, there's a ton of different index funds out there now that you can put money in, just contribute regularly every month and just track the index. If the total stock market goes up, you make money. If it goes down, you lose money. And over the course of history, the average return has been somewhere between 8 and 10%. A lot of people choose to try to invest actively and try to pick stocks and things like that. And you can definitely do that, and there's people that do well with that, but it is very time consuming to try to do that to an informed degree. Some people just get lucky, but if you're really like looking at quarterly statements and balance sheets and things of different companies, it takes a lot of time.
So Annabelle, after this video, I can link to a resource page that we have on our blog of some different podcasts and books and things that might be of interest to you guys in terms of finances. We've linked to that before, but there's a lot of good books out there that can really get you started on the right foot in terms of that, investing and just saving in general.
Yep.
Andrea says, have you guys ever considered doing volunteer work overseas while getting to travel at the same time, of course? Do you know of any organizations that do this with physical therapists?
We've definitely considered it, and we probably will do that in the future. We haven't so far. I don't know of organizations.
I don't know of any organizations. I know there's a couple of companies that will like sponsor you, but probably if we were to do it, I don't know exactly how we'd go about it. I know we've had several people reach out to us before that said like, hey, I did a volunteer trip here. So I don't know all the organization names, but I do know that we've had people reach out to us who would be willing to give us information. If anybody is watching this, if you want to provide any insight. But it is something we thought about. Like, we are very fortunate to be able to design our lifestyles how we want to and have so much time off. And I think one area that we are lacking in is volunteerism. And I really want to get into doing more volunteerism. Whether or not we'll do it more at home in the U.S. or abroad, we haven't really decided yet.
Yep.
But definitely a cool idea.
Nice. That's such good information. Paid off all that debt, so now I can relax a bit.
Good
Paying
for
off
you.
debt always feels wonderful, so congratulations.
Good job, Naya. That is definitely goal number one. And then move on from there and hit your savings, change your lifestyle up a little bit. Annabelle says, save first, budget later, so smart. Hel says, so much good information. Thank you. Thanks for watching. Elizabeth wants to know, in setting up a tax home, do you have to pay market value if you are paying a family member for, say, a room or a living space?
Yes, you do have to pay market value. The best way to figure out what market value is in your area is to look on sites like Craigslist, Facebook, and look at listings for a room in a house. Usually you can find those pretty easily. See what the going rate is and then pay somewhere around that amount. I think that's probably the safest way to do it.
Yeah, so unfortunately you can't just like pay mom and dad $50.
Yeah.
It needs to be reasonable in case you ever got audited.
Depending on your location though, it can be extremely low. For like a room in a house in our area is probably somewhere in the $300 to $400 a month range. So depending on where you live, it might still be very affordable.
Absolutely. Naya says, I have contacted a tax office and they said, yes, you do need to do fair market value.
Yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
That's what travel tax encourages. So again, thank you guys so much for y'all that tuned in live. If you wouldn't mind, just hit the like button, give us some hearts, subscribe if you are watching later on the YouTube or listening on the podcast. And I just kind of want to say, as kind of some closing remarks, any of you guys who are watching this, if you choose to do a travel therapy lifestyle, you can kind of just set up your life how you want. I would really encourage you guys to just evaluate what is important to you. So if something like having that traditional American big house, nice car, country club membership is important to you, and all you want to use travel therapy for is just a couple years to just get done with it and then see a few cool things in the US and then settle into a traditional American lifestyle, totally cool, totally okay. But if you look at your life and you say, I want to value these experiences more, I want to see more of the world, I want to spend more time with my family, I want to live a more minimalist lifestyle so that I can have more good experiences and just do more with my life. Like maybe you want to take off more time to volunteer and have other hobbies and tutor people and do things that you want to do. Well, then maybe you can look at the expense side of your equation and say, okay, if I can live on less, then I can have more time and freedom and money to put towards these other things. So if that's something that's important to you and you could see designing your life in a crazy way like we have, then go for it because you can totally make it work.
Yeah, I've seen so many times in my life that people do things just because they think it's what they're supposed to do or what other people around them are doing, and they don't actually put any thought into what they really value with their life. And if you just sit down and like prioritize what you really want out of life, like, most people it's see parts of the world, spend time with kids, those kind of things, and think about if your spending is aligning with those values. If it's not, then change things. Try to make your spending align with what you value. And for a lot of people, that means having more time off to do things. So as travel therapists, we are in a very lucky position to be able to take more time off and take advantage of it.
Yeah, it's been the best decision of our lives. Like it's just spun our trajectory of our life in a totally amazing, different way that we never could have imagined back when we thought, well, we'll just do travel therapy for 4 to 5 years and then settle down and do like the normal thing. Well, it's been so much better than that once we started realizing how much money we could truly save and how much value we could really have in our life and all the experiences. So I definitely encourage you guys to just live the life that you want to live. Don't be confined by the boundaries of what you think is normal and what other people's expectations are and that sort of thing. So we're here to say that like you can totally do it too. There are other travel therapists out there doing it. So I hope you guys appreciated this and learned something. Please send us a message if you have questions.
Yep. Thanks for watching. See you next week.
Have a good night.
Bye.